with Worth the Calories.
Hooray! Sugar high!
Sugar, yes, there is a little bit of a sugar high going on here, so this could be a really energetic episode where we crash halfway through and we're like, yeah, we baked stuff and it happened, and give us tea.
Boys and girls, this is what happens when you have cake for breakfast.
2020, we have a bake-off back.
I'm so glad I know it's delayed.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel as delayed as it might be.
Okay.
I feel they've done well to get Bake Off out at this time in the year compared to when it could have been out.
Yeah, absolutely. It was going to be my first question is, do you think it should be back?
I mean, the geek in me is intrigued to know.
Because we like to know how everything works.
It's intrigued to know what legal permissions they had to get to allow the crew and the contestants and the judges all to be allowed to congregate in their own little quarantined bubble village.
Yeah.
And presumably they're having to have, like, I don't know, their day-to-day food delivered from a 10-foot distance and wiped down with disinfectant.
But exactly, there might be a whole cafeteria thing going on.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they've got them support. You've got all the first aid people. You've got the people who clean and prepare. You've got people buying in ingredients. You've got the people filming the B-roll. I'm really interested how and when they got that of, like, people sharing meals and giving cakes to their neighbours. Like, I'm not sure we should be doing that in 2020, frankly.
I mean, that's one of our problems, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now that we currently are going to offices to offload our bake-off bakes, we're either going to eat a lot of cake, which I don't object to, or we're going to have to consider who would be willing to accept cake from us in these interesting times. But yeah, so basically what I'm saying is I want a behind-the-scenes documentary, including the discussions they had with the local council, to work out how they've managed to do a COVID-proof, socially distanced, but clearly not that distanced, bake-off.
I wonder if there is a standard thing about productions like this and the ability to continue doing and what you set in place. So rather than them having to do an agreement with this lot and different soaps and different TV shows and movies and so on, there is these are your established guides, and it means quarantining, it means a bubble for all your people working together, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And who do they have to get that sign-off from?
But it sounds like you are pleased it's back.
Yes, I am. I'm very pleased it's back.
You
back.
think it's a good thing for this year?
To be honest, I think I kind of I knew they were intending to start filming once they could, but then I lost track of it.
Right.
So the other day when I suddenly saw that it was coming back, I think it was only actually maybe like 4 or 5 days before it was on telly that I saw it was on telly. So yes, I was very excited.
Nice. Okay,
yes.
Good. I'm a little on the fence about it, to be honest, just a bit because of all this effort they're having to go to for it. But at the same time, it is nice having this sort of positivity and this. We have all been baking. I did a 10-week Instagram baking show about doing stuff. So I have friends and family who have done a lot more baking. So almost they should have been doing something special rather than just we're doing another series. Maybe that should have been the.
Oh, interesting. I suppose I see it as a cost-benefit analysis of there's, of like the cost being the extra effort, etc., the permissions, blah blah blah, but the benefit being, I think, a morale boost for the nation.
Right. Yeah.
And I like that it's relatively familiar as opposed to something else being weird and different.
Yes. That's nice, and I think I agree with you on that point as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've had a few changes in the Vose household as well.
Have we?
Well, we're obviously locked down and working at home and all this. We have a new hob.
Oh, we do. Yes, that's true. That's true.
So we had a gas leak in our gas hob, just for everyone who isn't aware. So we've had to replace that with an induction hob. Except for a couple of years at uni and a couple of years living in Ruislip, I've always cooked on gas. So this is very new to me. You are more experienced at it.
Well, I 10 years ago actively chose to put an induction hob in my flat in Surbiton, mainly because of my propensity to forget that the hob's on. I figured which is the type of hob that is least likely to burn my home down, and I decided that an induction hob was the way to go, because even if I did just happen to leave a tea towel on the hob, as may or may not have happened on my previous electric hob, that if it was an induction hob, because the tea towel was not magnetic, it wouldn't set on fire, as may or may not have happened on my previous electric hob. So I cooked on that induction hob for probably 2 years
Okay.
before we moved in together, and I re-entered the world of gas.
Right.
But I was very excited and keen to have another induction hob.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to see how that affects it, because I think you can bake differently on an induction hob. I've not tried it yet, but I'm looking forward to integrating that. So it's a slightly nerdy techie thing.
I think, as we'll go on to talk about, I think it has had an impact on second time round, but my success with the caramel for the pineapple upside down cake.
Oh, okay.
But more to come on that later.
We will talk on that. The other change that has, of course, happened is we have a couple of new co-hosts.
Yay!
So we have Kitty Furry friends, we have Lex, and we have Kira, who I'm sure will show up on recordings over time.
Lockdown kittens.
And may get referenced at times. So just to keep everyone up to date. Bake Off 2020. So we're on the long road to learning everyone's names again.
Yeah, I must say, I'm looking at a photo of all the contestants, and I can remember a little bit about something that happened to each of them. But if you ask me what all of the names were, I'm really sorry. I know there were 2 marks.
Yeah, there's 2 marks. So, but they called particular attention to that. We know Sura.
Yes.
Because of something that happened. We know Dave because of something that happened, and I made his cake. Peter, and we had Peter who won.
Yes.
Very deservingly, yes. I think.
So I think we, rather than go through an in-depth discussion of each of their bakes,
absolutely, yeah.
I think if we sort of pick out the things that we actually remember,
yeah,
and then we can talk about our baking exploits.
So was it last year that they swapped and they did Biscuit Week first?
Oh,
I think it might have been. I think Cake Week coming first is the right thing.
I think Cake Week coming first feels like the normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what they did last year, if I'm honest.
Because cakes are the fundamental bake.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, when we come to meringues and caramels and patisserie and biscuits and all this, yes, they're things that a lot of people do. But butter and sugar and egg and flour.
Yeah, you've got to be able to bake a basic cake.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I quite like that. However, Battenberg's a slightly unusual one.
Now, you see, I didn't mind it because I think a Battenberg is quite a traditional British cake.
True.
You know, it's in the sort of, it's not necessarily
the
one
pantheon of
know, it's not necessarily my first bake. But you know, if you think what are the sort of traditional British cakes that you used to see in the supermarket before, you know, in the 80s, before life got a bit more exotic in supermarkets, Mr. Kipling's Battenberg
and Fondant Fancies.
Fondant Fancies.
That's it, isn't it?
You know, a Victoria Sponge.
Oh yeah, and a Cherry Bakewell.
Cherry Bakewell. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's in that sort of core British cakes. Now, what I thought was interesting was it was a traditional British cake, but I think everyone's very much, or the contestants are very much, we're like series 11 of Bake Off. We've got to make it super complicated. I'm not convinced they did. I think some people got way overcomplicated with what they were doing. And I also think that people who try to do lots of chopping into even smaller bits of their Battenberg are on a sticky wicket from the start.
Absolutely. It's a fairly... If you bake it well and not overbake it, it's a fairly fluffy cake.
Yeah.
So when you start cutting it, pieces come off quite easily.
Yeah.
So...
And maybe that detailed slicing works when you've got all the time in the world to let it cool and then slice it fully cold.
Yeah, true.
But that is not the experience of the Bake Off tent. The Bake Off tent is to be able to bake everything with slightly less time than even a standard bake would need. So I found it interesting that people had these very exotic ideas about chopping up the middle of their Battenbergs. But, yes.
Any that particularly stood out? Any that we want to comment on?
Well, I mean, and I guess this is a preference thing, but I was bemused by Lorea's choice of flavours.
Oh, the bubblegum
and Soda Stream, or cream soda. That was it. I was a bit like, really? But
if you like sweet and powerful flavours, fine. But...
I mean, for myself, that's the sort of flavour that I would actively avoid.
Yeah.
But then I'm aware that not everyone has the same taste.
It's the sort of thing you can see the kids going for.
Yes.
Really quickly, but
as a sort of a strategy for success, it's not something that I'd predict either Paul or Prue would like.
Yeah.
And so it seems a little misguided.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you look at some of the other flavours where you've got things elderflower and rosewater and lemon and
yes,
in inverted commas mature flavours, you know, but things that they would go, oh yes, that is a nice sophisticated cake.
Yes.
Not something that's bright blue and with really thick marzipan.
Yeah.
That's, having rolled out marzipan, yes, it's easy to do it thick because actually it rolls quite well, but...
So, I suppose there's two things in it that I was thinking of. That for me, the one that looked the best from the outside, certainly, was the lass who's the pantomime director.
The rhubarb and custard one.
Rhubarb and custard.
Absolutely agree with you.
I mean, I thought what she'd done with her marzipan looked absolutely stunning.
Yeah, well done her.
Yeah, I mean, she was another one that was a bit overambitious with chopping up the middle, but I think because of what she did with the marzipan, that she got away with that. And also I really liked the idea of the flavours. I mean, I quite like rhubarb.
Okay, well, there we go.
quite like that sort of idea of it's a sweet cake and all the marzipan's sweet, but it's got this really sour flavour in the middle.
Nice.
So yeah, that appealed to me. Which ones appeal of them all? Which ones appeal to you?
Well,
the
the
most?
sound of the espresso martini one is one. I mean, we love an espresso martini anyway.
Oh yeah.
I like chocolate very much.
Oh yeah.
So that absolutely kicks into the right sort of flavour for me.
Nice.
Is this where we talk about making it?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yes. And that's why, so exactly like you say, if we make all the in fact, people might be listening to this for the first time, so let's introduce them better. Every week, we make the technical challenges from the previous week, and we talk about them, and how they went, and how they do, and so on and so forth. If we do that every week, we're going to be making a lot of stuff that we might not necessarily be able to eat, and we don't have anyone to share with anymore. Or it's harder to share with other people. Exactly like you said. It used to be, great, I'll make a cake, and then I'll take it to the office.
Exactly.
I'll have a slice, make sure we get to try it, but then the rest of it can get shared out. Fine.
Yes.
Let's not do that anymore. So I made Battenberg this week, which again was a hope of carving it up and sharing it with other people, but plans are getting curtailed very quickly at the moment.
Yeah.
Exactly like Paul said, you cannot taste the alcohol flavours in it. I think the coffee maybe, but it's also got 60 ml of espresso in it.
Yeah. I think you definitely can taste the coffee, but I think the coffee flavour comes primarily from the coffee jam.
Exactly, which is mostly espresso.
Yeah.
So the marzipan, the sponge, and the jam all have Kahlua and vodka in them.
Oh, yes.
Coffee liqueur.
The vodka, does the vodka really add anything to it?
Vodka doesn't have a flavour.
Yeah.
Really. Does
it add anything to the...
It's one of the reasons alcoholics like it so much, because you can't tell when they've been drinking. Like, I have heard this from people's stories. So, I don't know why you would add it.
Does it add anything to the chemistry of the bake?
Well, not really, and this was part of the problem. I would be loath to add more of either, because you're adding a lot of liquid.
Yeah.
So there were times you could see the sponges actually getting a lot more fluid.
Yeah.
And so...
So arguably, you could bake it and have much the same end result without the vodka.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and potentially the coffee liqueur. I think you'd have to ramp up the coffee flavour, and I think the vodka is to try to give it a hint of sharpness, maybe that sort of tang you get from a spirit.
So if someone wanted to try it and wanted to feed it to people that didn't like alcohol, they could totally just get rid of the alcohol out of the recipe and pretty much have the same result.
Yeah, I think I would turn it more into a coffee and chocolate. Because also, to get the dark colour, you're obviously adding cocoa to one of the sponges.
Yes.
And I think the chocolate flavour comes through really strongly.
Right.
Much more so than the coffee flavour. So
Agree.
Whether you actually do that with colouring instead, or just turn it into a chocolate and coffee.
I do seem to remember on a previous season them saying that coffee is one of those flavours that it's very easy to lose by accident when you're making a cake. So I wonder if that's what's happened with this one as well. Yeah. That you lose the coffee and you. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was delicious. I'm quite happy to be left with the chocolate, but
it's not what it promised to be, which is a little bit of a shame.
No.
But
so talk me through the baking of the Battenberg. The tricky bits, the easy bits.
So sponge was fine. I perhaps should have not had the whatever it's called, butter, quite so chilled.
Right.
Because it took a little bit of effort to really integrate it with the sugar, but that was okay.
And did you do that by hand or in
I did that in the
mixer?
stand mixer. Yeah, absolutely. Getting it into the tin. The sponges were actually okay. And then even cutting them up, I got more out of them than I expected to.
Okay.
So I was quite pleased with that.
Yeah, I was as well, nibbling on the leftovers. So what kind of tin did you use? Because they had lots of different tins on the show.
Yeah, so I used just a square tin, the sort that I use for brownies, tiffin, things like that. Because we don't have one with dividers, they actually have dividers. They were splitting it into 4, so you just get your 4 squares. So I think they end up with larger squares more easily.
Yeah.
Whereas mine end up with 2 rectangles that you then put on top. You flatten the top of them, put them on top of each other, and then cut it into squares. So I measured, right, what's the standard height at either end, and then cut it into that width to make sure I get that square. When it's front on, and then slice it up. Sponge was fine. I'm actually pretty comfortable with the sponge. Flavors notwithstanding.
It's interesting on the show how many people were told their sponge was really dry, because your sponge was not dry.
No,
it was delicious.
No, and especially the guy who didn't actually bake it fully, so couldn't use it, because you stick a skewer in it and you'd know if it's baked or not. So, but I can see it being overbaked, and especially again depending on what tin you've used, because once you have the dividers in, you've got more metal, you've got more heat being transferred to the edges of them,
and presumably quite a thin layer of sponge.
Thinner layers. So, if you see any of the pictures, and you would have seen the sponges before they were cut, there was a significant rise to one side and not the other.
I agree.
The insides rose much better. So,
Oh, good.
The espresso jam. This is where I had to do a lot on the induction hob for this and the marzipan, to be honest. But this was heating it to a medium heat and then low heat, and turning the jam sugar and the espresso into a syrup. I don't think I quite boiled it down to a syrup enough, and then it had half a sheet of gelatin. Maybe could have done with more gelatin, because I think what I ended up with was a alcoholic coffee syrup rather than a jam, if that makes sense. So when I put it on the sponges, you could see it soaking into the sponge, a bit more like a lemon drizzle than a jam.
That's interesting that you reminded me that there was gelatin in there, because I had been thinking, is jam sugar like magic then? Can you make anything into jam?
I mean, effectively, yes. And you don't always have to use gelatin, but I think because normally you would use a fruit, which obviously has a very different set of chemical ingredients than espresso, so I needed something to supply that setting.
Yes, because I was just thinking, coffee jam. That's very strange. Now, when I was in Japan, they used to have coffee jelly.
Right. Okay.
It was quite a standard thing to have coffee jelly with some kind of very processed cream on top. So I was like, okay, it's the same thing. But yes, it was interesting. So, how did you find the induction hob for changing between temperatures?
Okay. Obviously very easy to do. I'm not sure I'm confident enough yet on getting the temperature right.
Yeah.
And particularly when we come to the marzipan is an egg and sugar mixture that you whisk up, and then you have in a pan of boiling or simmering water. So the water was obviously simmering, but then as time goes on it starts boiling more, so you turn it down again, and then you turn it down again, and this is the point where I think with an induction hob you don't need the water anymore. You can actually have it just in the pan with the heat going through, because I think the heat is more even. You're not cooking specific points. Where actually, because I had it in the pan of water, where we're getting into detail here, but where the saucepan met the bowl that I had the ingredients in was getting particularly hot itself.
Yep.
So maybe I should have not had it touching the edges of that and just sat in a larger thing of water. And
I think it's the sort of thing we just have to keep playing with and be willing to experiment to disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm interested. I think when we come to times like melting chocolate and stuff, I'm looking forward to trying that, melting butter and so on.
Yeah.
Because certainly at low heats, it seems to be, just use the induction hob and go for it.
Yeah.
So could be good. The marzipan. The marzipan has ended up a little more sugary crunchy than I think I would have liked it to be. But at the same time, it's definitely marzipan.
Yeah, it's good.
And after kneading it, I could see the consistency of it changing as I was kneading it, and it getting smoother. So as you knead it with your palms, it's breaking less. So you're like, I can see this is going to roll out. And then I chilled it and rolled it out, and it rolled out very nicely. It rolled out to significantly more than I needed, which again might be just for the size I cut it down to. So it ended up a bit thick in places, but
I was very impressed, because to me marzipan is something one buys from the shops.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly what I've always done. And I can see actually 2 or 3 more goes, and I think I could be, yes, I know how to make marzipan, and marzipan's a thing you can just do.
Yeah, because I think it was just that maybe the sugar hadn't dissolved quite enough.
which is partially, I think, just not quite getting it hot enough in that pan of water. So
yeah, but it still tasted good, especially with a bit of boozy coffee jam
coffee syrup
on
it, yeah.
Just what one needs for one's breakfast.
So I think it was an interesting bake. I think it was a good bake to test them and show a bit of range of skills and doing stuff. The fact that they all had to make marzipan and so on, it showed a little bit of some of that artistic stuff. But we've got a challenge later on that had a lot more artistic going on.
Yeah.
And I quite enjoyed doing it. I feel like Battenberg might have been one they did as a technical in years previous.
Possibly. I do feel like we've seen Battenberg before. But yeah, I thought it was a good signature to start, allowed a bit of personality to show through, had a few skills being tested. Yeah, I liked it. And I liked yours.
There was a lot left, so we're okay. So the technical pineapple upside down cake.
Yes.
You can take over because you did this.
I did. So, do you know, pineapple upside down cake, I'm not sure it's something I've ever had. It's certainly not something that I've had on a regular basis. I'm aware that it exists as a concept, but I don't think it's anything my mum ever made.
I don't think I've ever had it as a single pudding, but I'm sure I've certainly seen it, if not had it as a large bake.
And I think most of the time it is done as a large bake. When I was doing a bit of looking around on the internet for different sort of recipes and different bakes, just to try and get some hints and tips, it was mainly as a large bake. So I think the individual puddings aspects of it was Paul Hollywood just trying to make life harder for people, perhaps.
Okay. And this is just as an aside, this is one of my annoyances with a bake-off, where it's things like make 6, but you can only buy those pudding tins in sets of 4.
Yes.
And it makes me think of all those ingredients we've got in our cupboard where we've used a teaspoon of them over the years.
It's the herbs from that's
the sumac and everything, and I've got gluten-free cooking ingredients and all this sort of thing. And we've got a lot of ground almonds because you can only buy ground almonds in 2 different sizes, and they needed enough ground almonds for the marzipan and the sponge in between those sizes.
Yeah.
So I've had to buy a big one, and I'm hoping I'm going to use ground almonds again, or they last until I make Tunis cake for Christmas.
If nothing else, it's my birthday in November. You can make me something almondy for my birthday.
Thank you. You're very kind. I'll make you lots of marzipan stuff. I'll make you a marzipan representation of the cats.
Okay. But I don't think this was... I mean, the irritations of only being able to get pudding basins in 4s aside, I don't think this was a bad technical.
Right.
I mean, presumably, the timing is always a challenge with the technical, but I think that's the standard challenge. And they said make a sponge, but I do think that's the sort of technical skill that a participant on the Bake Off should be expected to have.
Yeah,
I was quite happy to be given the ingredients.
Absolutely, but at the same time,
but that's not a ridiculous, because we have complained in the past about the technicals sometimes being a bit ridiculous. I don't think this was ridiculous. I think it was a good technical. So yeah. How did mine come out? I think mine came out all right.
Okay.
All right. They tasted good. They tasted good. To be fair, some of the they were not necessarily as decorative as they might have been, but then we just chose. I'm not going to whip out a whole load of double whipped cream at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning.
No.
So
yeah.
that sort of aspect hasn't been done. So I started off with the syrup, as they did. Now, I did what one normally sees on the Bake Off anytime anyone tries to make caramel, but we haven't had this season. I'm the one who's caramel crystallized.
Oh.
So actually I had to make the caramel twice.
Okay.
So the first time it didn't caramelize, it just went into all that hard crystally stuff. And
got
so
a bit of water in it or something.
And also I stirred it too much.
Oh.
So I just was following the instructions. I didn't read about making caramel or anything beforehand.
Okay.
So I put it in, I melted the sugar in, turned it up, and then I was stirring it constantly because I think, in my mind, stirring constantly is a thing that one does to food. So it didn't caramelise at all. Okay. It all went crunchy, crystally. And then because I'm an idiot, I pulled the spoon out of the pan, waved it around to cool it off a bit, and poked at it with my finger. So I've now got an enormous big blister at the end of my finger through sheer stupidity. Please, anyone, do not touch your boiling sugar. That's a really bad idea.
Public safety warning.
Exactly.
Do not touch boiling sugar.
So at that point, I just stuck it in the sink and put a lot of cold water in it and decided I would start again.
Okay.
But before I started again, I read up on making caramel on the internet, and there was a really good article about it in the Telegraph, actually.
Oh.
And basically, I know, right? So basically, the sort of the key things I took away from that were use a scrupulously clean pan, preferably a metal pan. So I used one of our Le Creuset metal pans instead. B, don't stir it all the time. And it also said put a little bit of lemon juice in. So whilst it steeps in lemon later in the recipe, actually once I dissolve the sugar, I just squoze one of the lemon wedges into it just a little bit.
Okay.
And it said use your pastry brush, and every now and then wet the pastry brush and run it around the edge so the water trickles down.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Okay.
And I found the induction hob really good for gently melting it. And then sort of I was using, like, I think flicking between 6 and 7 in the heats.
Okay. Wow.
And it's
quite hot though.
Yeah. And it formed a beautiful caramel.
Are you pleased with it?
Yeah, I was really pleased with it. And yes, I did not stir it at all.
Right.
Once beyond the sort of dissolving at the start. So yeah, basically, don't touch boiling sugar and don't stir your caramel too much.
Perfect.
Would be my hints for that. So that
it's been a learning experience.
It really has, and a very sore finger. So I did that. Added the extra water and the lemon juice in, so the syrup went fine. The cutting of the pineapple was interesting because we decided we didn't want to buy special cutters just to chop up a pineapple for a technical. So I found an alcohol measuring thing and use that for cutting out the centres, and then I just chopped off the edge. So mine looked more like pineapple nuts. I said nuts and bolts, but that worked fine. The sponge was very straightforward. It's a very, very simple sponge.
Good.
Just did it all in the mixer. And then I decided to. I know we only had 4 pudding basins, but I decided to use the silicone muffin mould for the rest of it because it said spread it across 6. I was like, well, I don't want to overfill the 4.
No, absolutely.
So I was like, I will spread it evenly across the 6.
Yeah.
And with hindsight, we didn't need to buy the pudding basins because it works perfectly well in the silicone muffin mould.
I wondered if it would be too soft for it, too hard to move the.
It was easier to get them out of the silicone muffin mould than it was to get them out of the...
Good to know.
Although, if it had been full of 6, getting them all out at the same time could have been a disaster. So, but anyway, it worked fine.
Okay.
So yeah, baked them. Fought them out of the, fought my way out of the pudding basins, and I think it all worked fine. I really like the lemoniness in the syrup. But I mean, really, it's a pudding, isn't it, rather than a cake?
Yes, yeah.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
I think
and that's why you would serve it with a custard.
That's why you serve it with custard.
Yeah.
But yeah, perfectly pleasant. I don't understand how the lass who made the ambulance Battenberg in the I can't remember what her name is, but in the technical, hers all came out quite crunchy.
They sunk for some reason, so I wonder if somewhere in the sponge she didn't add something, or enough of something, or used the wrong type of flour, something on those lines.
Yeah, because
or opened the oven too early is possible.
Because I was ready for mine to be a total disaster, but
and
they weren't.
I think the sponge was delicious. It was a really good sponge. It's particularly like where it gone obviously crispy with the bacon on top, and then where it integrated with the syrup really nicely. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I like the syrup. I enjoyed scraping the syrup out of the pudding basins.
I bet you did.
Which is why I'm on a sugar high.
Yeah, how do you feel about it as a technical challenge?
I think it was good.
Okay.
I think it was good. Yeah, I think it has enough potential for success. The technical challenges I resent are the ones where it's impossible for anyone to do it successsually.
Okay.
Whereas this one, clearly there were issues for some people, but if you know how to make a sponge and you keep a cool head, you could produce that successfully.
That's possibly my feeling on it, that it's a little too simple. The 2 real issues were she clearly did something wrong in the baking process, and one guy who didn't butter the moulds so they came out well.
I think there was some differentiation as to whether they judged their caramel properly.
The elements of that, but it's...
I think week 1, you shouldn't destroy people in the technical.
That's fair. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I liked it.
Yes. And certainly I feel like the technical didn't actually have an impact on the end result. Maybe that's the thing.
But it hardly ever does.
No.
And whether it should or not is a question mark. But, I mean, I think if you want to have the technical have an impact on the end result, you've got to make it a genuine exploration of, does someone have this technical skill?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically make shoe without giving them instructions or something like that. And I would accept that.
Yeah.
If they're, I mean, and to be honest, I would have accepted today having an impact on the end result, and not today, this week's. And maybe it did. Didn't Peter do quite well in the technical? And so it was at least a booster.
Second, I think, maybe
second.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of the people going out, I think that's where I don't feel like it had an impact. And maybe it's a good one because it doesn't have much about the assembly.
Yes.
That's important. It's about the baking and then you turn it out.
Yeah.
So the other challenges particularly are about how you can put things together or not.
Yeah. But we'll see. So we've been joined by Lex. So if you hear any banging, it's a ginger cat jumping around the study.
Right. And then we come to cakes that are busts.
Yeah, this is where I start to wonder whether they're too concerned with not repeating things they've done before.
Mm-hmm.
Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm interested in seeing whether people can bake, not whether people can produce artistic sculptures with cake.
Yep. Do you think the sculpture aspect, again, you're looking at the lower end of it rather than the winners, do you think the sculpture aspect was an impact, or is it all down to flavours and quality of bake? And that's a leading question, because I think it is.
I can't remember what Lorea's sculpture was. Oh, it was the poet, wasn't it?
Yes.
I thought it was very cute. I think you're right. I think they're actually judged properly on the bake.
Mm-hmm.
I think the sculpting and the decoration aspect of it is a gimmick.
Probably helped at the opposite end. I can't even remember who Peter made.
He made Chris Hoy. And I must say, I thought it looked really good.
Yeah,
I think he was very clever with how he did that. Exactly
like they said. He thought about it and he'd gone, oh, here's a way of doing it. And that's smart.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think it shows that actually what they weren't looking for. They weren't actually looking for great sculpting skills. They were looking for, can you make a cake impression of a celebrity?
Absolutely. A showstopper.
Yeah.
Centerpiece sort of thing.
And I guess cake, if you look at a lot of the cake businesses there are around the place, making a cake that has a specific theme for someone's birthday, things like that, is part of the business. I mean, the lady that made our wedding cake, do you remember when we went to talk to her about the cake? She had a cake in the shape of an aeroplane for Gatwick Airport out that she was taking up to launch something the next day. So I suppose it's not outside the realms of art possibility, but it did seem a little bit.
I think last year,
gimmicky.
This is what reminded me about Biscuit Week being the opener, because I think last year the showstopper was make a selfie of yourself somewhere you love, or at a moment you love, out of biscuit, which I think last year was a really interesting one because it was a really artistic group. This is one of the things that stood out this year. It's a lot of accountants and project managers and third sector. I don't feel like we've got many of the artistic end of the spectrum.
Are you saying accountants can't be artistic?
Yes. Yes, having worked with a lot of accountants. No, you know what I mean, though. No one who professionally, with the majority of their time, does something that involves them. Yeah. Yeah,
no, I take your point there. But it's interesting. I quite like this bunch. They feel quite normal. So.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit on some of the criticisms. I've been really interested that a number of articles have come up, particularly in US outlets,
right?
Which is quite interesting. And maybe it's just because Bake Off started a bit later over there. It started yesterday rather than Tuesday. But the series 10 of Bake Off felt like a victory lap. this is an institution, we all love it, and here's how great it is, and it now comes out in the US at the same time it comes out in the UK.
Right.
Series 11 feels like it's an institution, we need to take it down and point out all its flaws, almost in a clickbaity way.
I must admit, so you sent those articles to me and I read them as well. I felt very much that they were articles written by people who've been commissioned to write a takedown of Bake Off.
Right?
So whether that's what they thought or not, I felt like their commissioning editor had said, okay, Bake Off's starting, write about it, but be a bit mean.
Yeah.
Because we're fed up of articles being nice about Bake Off.
Exactly. And maybe it is just the reaction to last year. That's right, we wrote positively last year, let's write negatively this year, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's again a little bit the way articles are written in 2020. Let's write stuff that is to an extreme in the hopes that people share it and discuss it.
Yeah, possibly.
And I don't disagree with some of their points. Yes, some of the technicals have gotten a bit ridiculous, but at the same time, if it was possible to just watch and do all the technicals previously and you'd be able to do all the technicals flawlessly, the show itself would be influencing itself. So I think they need to keep mixing it up. I think they need to do interesting things with wok of pastry and so on.
And I think, and maybe it's all blurring into one, but I feel like the technicals in 10 were less ridiculous than the technicals in 9. Wasn't 9 the year where they ended up making pitta over an open fire?
And yeah, I hated that at the time. I think I still don't like it because I think it should be a technical challenge. It should be. And again, early seasons did it so well because they were make 24 Victoria sponges, 24 lemon tarts, and 24, chocolate Battenbergs or something. And just go and do it. It was something on those lines. But I don't like that they went to the extreme of cook over a fire and so on. But at the same time, I get it.
Yes.
I get the impulse to do it.
Yeah.
And I think taking it down as saying, it's now a mockery of itself and it's a mockery of being, it's the ridiculousness of being British and so on. I don't quite think that's true. And I think, like we said at the beginning, it's a positive thing to have it back. People are enjoying baking this year. We are all, chances are, putting on weight because of the baking and having to stay inside and not be able to go out so much. But eating and having nice things and sharing it with others is a joy.
Absolutely.
And I think the ability to do that through the show is a joy.
And I think they've still got the atmosphere in the tent of people wanting to help each other.
I was so surprised to see that comment about how it used to happen and it no longer happens.
It still happened. It happened this episode.
Exactly. It happens every single time. And maybe we don't necessarily get shown it.
Yeah.
But certainly these early episodes, there is so much content to go in there.
And there's so many people, and the people don't know each other as well anymore yet.
Exactly.
But I mean, certainly... there was like the Freddie Mercury head incident. There was help going on there, and I saw Peter offering to help the guy that was making Mary Antoinette's head, and there was definitely
absolutely
a bonding. New presenter,
Mr. Lucas.
Thoughts?
I think he is fine. Reminiscent of Harry Hill on the Children's Bake Off Junior. Get a comedian on who has an established routine, who occasionally slips into it, but is generally quite gentle. I feel like we get that. I feel Noel is probably the most extreme we've seen of any presenter who does their thing. He does go up and be fairly weird at people and do goth stuff.
Yes.
So, but Matt Lucas just is now gentle, go and muck around. I think I loved Sandy. I think she was really nice and a really good, positive aspect of the show. But I was so over the jokes she and Noel did. They just had nothing they could do, and it was all about her size.
Yeah, I was about to say, I could live without ever seeing another Sandy Toksvig short joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was sad to hear Sandy Toksvig was leaving, because I've got an awful lot of time for Sandy Toksvig. I really enjoy, though, this pairing of Noel and Matt. I think I suspect they've known each other for years.
Yeah.
But there is a nice repartee between the two of them, and I really like the gentleness that Matt Lucas has got with the sort of the warmth that he shows with the contestants.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm very positive about him. I think I like it a lot.
I think there is an aspect of him and Noel working together that they will each give and take the same as each other. I think they're sharp in the same way. Sandy Toksvig is clearly very sharp.
She's super clever.
Very good at what she does, but not in a way that I think she can bring through on this show. Very rarely can she make jokes about Byzantium and the way it impacts baking or something, something on the stuff that she probably knows a lot about.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the show where she can show that off. Whereas character humour, Matt Lucas has been doing it. When he was on Shooting Stars and things.
Gosh, that was so long ago.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
what's on the doors? George Doors.
Exactly.
Sorry.
You're so high.
No more sugar for Catherine.
Sue and Dave.
Oh, do you know what? I feel sorry for both of them.
I do, yeah, exactly. I don't think anyone is at fault. Maybe she shouldn't have been flapping around in that way. Maybe he shouldn't have been walking up behind someone who was leaning over a table. So
you can totally see how it happens.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, I empathise more with her because I can totally put myself in that position.
Yeah.
Because I am a little bit of an extravagant arm flapper. And I can also imagine being quite the same amount of devastated as she clearly was at what had happened. So...
I think it was important to show him being like, yeah, it happens. We all do stuff like that. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. He is clearly a fairly laid-back chap. So yeah. I also appreciate, this has been a criticism of the show in previous years, the editing highlighting controversy, making it look like that ice cream was out of the fridge for an hour, whereas actually it was a few minutes. Things like that. So...
Yeah, I don't think they highlight it. I mean, they showed it.
Exactly.
But then they showed... It's all cool, and everyone comforts her, and actually she's really upset. She's not sitting there in the background going, wow, I sabotaged him.
And they showed everyone rallying around her, everyone rallying around him.
Yes.
And then they showed her being devastated that she'd won.
Yes.
And I think that is probably the point that sells it, because, she didn't want to win. She wanted him to win as an apology.
Yeah.
So, to wrap up, any bakers that you're... pipping for winning, anyone that you're interested to see what they do?
So I'm interested to see, in general,
okay,
I'm interested to see how complex the challenges are as we go on.
Okay.
Because obviously normally everyone gets to go home and practice for 5 days before the next weekend. Whereas they don't have that I mean, presumably they let them have some practice time in some format. I mean, it's not like your only practice time is before you come to the tent and now we've got 6 weeks where your only bakes are the real thing. So presumably there's some form of practice time given. This is why we need that behind-the-scenes documentary.
I wonder if... Because I'm pretty sure what they get up front is a thing to say, here are all the different weeks, and here are all the different things you need to come up with. You need to come up with a signature and a showstopper every week.
Yeah.
And so you design them up front, and then you practice them.
But you're not going to practice them all. I mean, who has the time for that?
Well, and this is why some weeks they say, oh, I didn't practice this.
Yeah.
I know I'm not good at bread, so I'm just going to wing it. Things like that.
But I think you'd be foolish if your practice time at this before you get in the tent is dedicated to the final week showstopper.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm just wondering if we will see the impact of that as the show goes on, because this first one, like this carving a bust out of cake, is the one that they've probably had the opportunity to practice at home. More than anything else. And as the weeks go on, they'll have had significantly less opportunity to practice each. So are we going to see more disasters?
Maybe.
So I'm just, or has the show taken that into account, and maybe the complexity of the showstoppers won't go up in the same way as we'd expect in a normal season. So I'm just interested to see how that pans out. The lass, again, who I've forgotten her name, long hair, glasses, pantomime director. What's she called? Lottie. Lottie's got her eye on the prize. I think she's got a proper amount of game in her, and I think she's got some proper skills. So I'm interested to see what she pulls out. I'm also interested to see... Go on.
She's from West Sussex.
Okay.
And has a Lancastrian great-grandmother who was into cake baking, according to this.
Nice.
She's sort of got some of our background going on.
Combo.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the music teacher guy who made the ridiculously complicated things that didn't quite end up as complicated as they could have been. The flautist. What was he called? That's him. Rowan. I'm interested to see how convoluted his bakes continue to be, because he's clearly got skills, but I think his ambition outweighs the amount of time he's got available to produce the bakes.
Yeah.
So yes.
Will he take on board that comment of under promise and over deliver?
Don't know. Because, I don't know. He doesn't look like someone that takes a lot of feedback on board.
If they've had to design and submit what they're going to do, does he get to change that now?
Presumably they've submitted their ingredient list.
Yeah.
So yes. How about you? Who have you got your eyes on?
Much the same. I think Mark. So this comes back to my theory, which I desperately want to be proven right every year, that people who struggle early on do better later on.
Okay.
Because they know how to deal with issues in the tent.
Right.
They know how to tone it back. They know how to, that's going wrong quite early. Let's start now rather than bake it and then figure out it's gone wrong. So I think he might be one who...
Which one's he?
Mark was the chap, I want to say single father, carer.
Oh, he's got the 2 daughters.
Yes. Who, I can't remember what he made now. He definitely made pineapple upside down cake in Battenberg.
Oh, but he's the one. He thought he was going out, didn't he?
Yes.
I must admit, when he was going, oh my god, I thought it was me. I was thinking, I can't remember why you think you might be going out.
Where the woman who almost went out, I think, will possibly go out because she's not quite clued into it in the right way. You know, there are always slightly weaker people who go out early, and there are people who survive because those weaker people go out. I'm wondering if he might be someone who girds himself and figures out how to play the game and takes this early experience of, I know what I did there and there and there. Maybe this is because, he talked about this, my challenge is to accept that I'm going out in week 1. I think he's introspective, so I think he will reflect on what he does, and I don't think it phases him.
Is he the one that made something with sour cherry and chocolate? Because I can't remember who made that. I just remember thinking I'd like to eat it.
Yes. Yes, I can't remember.
Yes, this is just a little hint for the future for you, my love. If whatever it was with sour cherry and chocolate appears on the recipes page, I would like to eat that.
You like cherry and chocolate, do you? Is that what you're telling me? Okay,
yes.
That's good to know. I will take that on advisement.
So yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the show. I felt sad that Larea left, because as a person, she's someone that I would have been quite happy to have on future episodes. I thought she came across incredibly well.
Yeah.
I went to university in Durham, so I've got my heart's in Durham. I just think her flavours were way too experimental, and she didn't support it with good baking. So I think she was the right person to go, but it doesn't mean I wasn't sad to see her leave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
I think, like you say, it's a really good crowd this year. One of the comments on those articles was about there seemed to be a criticism of them picking people for diversity, but also a comment that diversity is really good. So I'm not sure quite what point they were trying to make on that article. Again, I didn't like the article, so I'm going to point out its flaws. But at the same time, I don't feel like this series has gone for characters.
No, they just seem like a bunch of nice, normal people.
Exactly. And particularly, Peter talked about seeing something on Series 3 that taught him a lesson on how to do baking as well when he was 10.
Just makes me feel really old.
But, yeah, if I knew I was even applying for this show, I would be watching every episode before and making notes of things and making notes of anytime Paul or Prue say, I like that flavour, I don't like that flavour.
Yeah.
I would have a list, I would have a notebook, but at the same time we're quite into game theory and, how you play the thing and min-max
eyes on the
stuff.
prize.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Okay. I think we're done. I think we've got biscuits next week.
I think we're done. I think
you need to go and crash.
I need to go and crash.
And then we can have some Battenberg later.
Yeah.
Join us next week. You can make sure you can smash that subscribe button. Make sure you follow us. Make sure you look us up. Oh, we always post stuff on Instagram.
Yes.
So follow @EloquentGushing on Instagram.
And if you make the cakes, link us, message us. I'd love to see everyone else's cakes.
Absolutely. We know there are a horde of people who like to try the technicals. Answer me the question of what are you doing with the excess bakes now? Yeah. Have you found neighbours, friends, brownie groups, film clubs, book clubs that you can share these things with? Or are you just making sure they're really good so you get to eat them all now? Hit us up on Instagram @EloquentGushing, Twitter @EloquentGushing, Facebook @EloquentGushing. You can send an email, podcast @EloquentGushing. You can find us on Twitter, all the places. Make sure you follow us and we'll be talking each week about all the great bakes.
Yay.